thank you. Right one up here. All right, this is policy committee. I got the right, yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, it is one, I'm sorry. I was like, it's not January 30th, it is January 30th.
It is January 30th.
Yeah,
It doesn't
okay.
feel like it
No,
should be, but
I'm
it
sorry.
is,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, all right.
January went by really quick.
Yes.
Really did.
Okay. All right, I'll call this meeting to order. The flag, excuse me, is right over there in the corner, 5:17. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are all present. Coming? Public comment.
Yes, Greg Newell, Hermon. I was looking over the Student Activities Fund policy that's being looked at, and a couple things. One is the references, the DI fiscal accounting, we don't have that, or the JJE student fundraising activities. We don't have those policies. And also it says, you, the superintendent, may develop and implement procedures relative to these funds. And I'm wondering if those already been created or not, those procedures. I presume there's got to be some procedures for raising funds. And I was also interested in why are funds that are being raised for student activities been put part of the budget? Is that like a state requirement? Is that something that just this school district does? Because I would think you'd want to keep that separate from regular things, because these are for, different activities that the kids are doing and raising of money. So those are just my questions, and still no subcommittee policy meeting policies on the agenda again. I think that's been asked for the past year. Hopefully someday we'll be able to get it on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Any other public comment? Review of second reading. I don't believe there were any concerns or questions from the last meeting. Anything to look at. We are obviously moving to redacting CF in lieu of the job description, the principal job description. We, school committee approved first reading of CHD, which is the review of administrative decisions, to the MSMA sample. The procedures on fiscal restraint and seclusion, that was obviously the one that we brought forward due to some legislative changes. That was added. And the selection of teaching personnel, as I was able to dig to the bottom of that, that is intended to be GCF. So we brought that forward. And then finally, the public admission fees for school performances, exhibits, competition. We had quite an old policy on that, and that was to be redacted. So I don't remember or believe there was any suggestions to changes to that. Okay. So moving into the first reading, or excuse me, preparation of first reading. The first policy, I put on the agenda the first policy as JED, attendance. So you have an attendance policy. You can see that this one gets looked at quite a bit. I had a request to look at this policy, and specifically, I would like to look at the excused absences part of this policy, which is on the first page. Is number 1. According to Maine state law, the following school absences are deemed excusable. And you have several items there, 6 things in which a student is excused from school. Number one, personal health, including the person's physical, mental, and behavioral health. And then you'll see that parentheses, medical documentation is required for 3 or more consecutive days absent. Number two, a health professional that must be made during the regular school day, and obviously that's not uncommon, right? When we see a variety of specialties, orthodontists, dentists, yeah, that they just have to be done during the day. We typically ask for some type of medical, appointment card when that's claimed. The observance of recognized religious holidays when the observance is required during the regular school day. A family emergency, we try to give some specific examples that would constitute emergency, certainly bereaving, a legal obligation, etc. A planned absence or for a personal and or an educational purpose that has been approved. That's that, what do we call those? The advanced absence forms. That's not uncommon to see students with those when their family is planning that trip, that educational trip to Disney. Or a moose hunt, which I think are obviously are great family experiences, and we certainly don't want to penalize students. And then finally, emergencies and other exceptional situations approved by administration, including educational disruption. So what I would...
Can I just,
Yes,
when it says on number 2, a healthcare professional, can we put appointment in there, or an appointment with a healthcare professional? That might not fit for someone else, but it just,
Oh, yeah.
A
It does
healthcare-
seem like it's missing a word there, so
Right.
health,
right.
so
An
either an
appointment,
appointment with
yeah.
a healthcare professional or a healthcare professional appointment, either way, just
I think it's missing a word there.
like,
Yeah. I think that having an appointment with a healthcare professional makes a lot of sense.
okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, an appointment. So I would certainly let the principals speak to this, but the concern was brought to my attention to look at number 1. Personal health, including the person's physical, mental, and behavioral health. And then you'll notice the medical documentation is required for 3 or more consecutive days. I was in a meeting with Mr. Walsh prior to this meeting, or the past meeting, and he showed me his folder of chronic absenteeism and truancy. And I know the high school attendance rate is about 85% this month, which is well below our expectations. And specifically, and you guys know this, with chronic absenteeism, it's based on 10% of days. So if you've missed 10% of the days, you are considered chronically absent. And then obviously truancy is, there's some age components, pre-K at 6.
Pre-K to 6 and then 7 on.
7 on.
Yep.
Where 7 unexcused or 5 cumulative and then 7 cumulative and 10 unexcused. What we are seeing specifically at the high school, and again, this is where I'd ask you to interject, we're seeing a lot of people who they don't have 3 consecutive days, but they have calls for 20 or 30 days of sickness. And we're in January, and we've got young men and women who are out 20 days already due to sickness. But because they are not 3 consecutive, we're not asking for medical documentation.
We're running into that as well, not at the volume that the high school has, but we have a handful of students where we're seeing the same thing. 20, 30 days of school missed by kindergartners, and so when it's at this level, you're talking about retention in kindergarten, because they're not progressing, they're not there.
And we may have inadvertently already added to the policy, because if it's not explicitly said, we decided to add it. So if they have 4 more in a quarter, we would require it as well. So even though it's not here, we saw the same issue and addressed it. But I believe it'd be nice if the policy backed it up.
Yeah, I think ultimately what I would like to recommend to the policy committee and then to the school committee is that, we're not about I got you, but we also, a tummy ache or frankly, not even being sick and just being able to call the school and say, my child is sick, and not go through getting him here this is important, that's not acceptable. You know, by law, they're supposed to be in school. And we just feel that this is starting to become an abuse. And feel that putting a number on here for where we would begin to ask for medical documentation, clearly, you've missed 10 days due to sickness. And if you're truly sick like that, then I would hope you have seen a healthcare provider at this point. And again, we're not gonna take those away, but we just wanna see that you've seen somebody. So I have a recommendation, but I would certainly open that up to what you folks feel would be an appropriate number of days too.
I would think that once they reach the level of chronic absenteeism or truancy, we would require at minimum something after that point. I'm open to. I think 4 in a quarter might be. Yeah, might be-
4 1/4 gets you to just about the chronic absence
Is that-
level. Yep.
Yeah, about 40 days.
So when does a conversation with, I mean, obviously, you folks talk, all of, it's part of the job, you talk to the parents and all, but
Ongoing.
it's an ongoing conversation would, and certainly not something dictated by policy, but are you getting a response from parents when you make the call and say, can we talk about what's going on, you know, the conversations, are you getting a good response
It
from?
really depends, and like I said, we only have like a small handful of parents, and those are, the parents that seem to be the most resistant, to that. We've involved guidance at our school, I'm sure you have as well. The classroom teacher reaches out, I reach out, Mrs. Goodman, we set up meetings, we get, director of guidance involved. We try to put in some supports, for the family, you know, sometimes it's, you know, a lack of resources, and any way that we can help, you know, we offer to do that. It's a really tough issue to battle, I think, when you get to that level with that handful of students. We have made DHS calls, because, it is classified under educational neglect. So we have gone that route with some families, and like I said, like, very small number of families, at our school, but we've really had to pull on all the resources that we can to get the kids to come to school, so.
What was your idea, Micah? I liked the 4.
I'd like to see it at 10 total. So once they've hit 10 absences for illness, wherever that point is in the year, right? That could be by October, that could be in January, that could be in May. But I think once we've hit, you've called in 10 times for sickness, then at that point, moving forward, the administration has the right to ask for a medical documentation.
Almost seems like too many though, because I want to make sure that if we're doing at the middle school 4, that whatever we're doing is consistent, is 4 1/4.
So 4 1/4 adds up to 16. The reason we did 4 was because if you get 4 absences by November, then you're on trajectory to get 18 over the year. And the goal is to catch them early. Regardless of what number is finally chosen, what this allows us to do is to start marking them unexcused, and then that allows us to use the truancy law, because truancy is only unexcused. So really what we're trying to do is, if you're not documenting this, then it could be a truancy, and that's when we go down the path of 7 days you're out of school, then we call parents, we set up parent meetings, etc. And then there's a lot more teeth with that, and that's why we're doing it. It doesn't bother me either way. I can see benefit either, because the other thing is that you could get to 10 on the other end of it in April and start requiring it, but by the 4 1/4 you may not even have gotten to that point. So on the flip side, you can see it either way.
I think the key is consistency,
Yeah,
whatever we
that's what
decide.
I
we
just
want
want
to
to make sure, yeah.
I know the high school would prefer 10, but obviously for them, that's also where the truancy comes in, right? At 10 days unexcused absence, you are now truant as a high schooler.
And are you talking whole day?
Yeah,
What
so,
if?
yeah, no,
Okay.
it's, a day is considered half of your academic programming. So if you,
Okay.
yeah, if you leave at 12:05
Okay.
through your parents, then that's not considered. Now, remember, at the high school level, courses are credits, right? So it can impact you at a course level, but not at that larger attendance level.
So is the definition of unexcused, is that when you don't show up and nobody calls and says you're coming?
Yeah, if you're
If I
not,
call as a parent,
Yep.
and I call 10 times, 12 times, 2 times, whatever it is, because I've made had a conversation with the office and said, my child's not coming in, that is classified as an excused absence because contact was made.
Right, so that's what we're saying is that what is happening a lot now, or starting to happen a lot, specifically at the high school, is that number one, parent is calling in, or we're reaching out and saying, hey, so-and-so's not here, oh yeah, they're sick. Oh yeah, they're sick. Oh yeah, and they're getting marked down as excused because the parent has confirmed that they are ill. And what we're starting to see is that we're getting 20, 30 of those, and it's like, okay, again, something's not right here. You know, if you've been sick 30 times, you've missed 30 days of school, you've missed 1/6 of your academic program.
So, and this is kind of a rhetorical question statement, the conversation obviously happens with students, the older students. I'm talking like middle school, high school students saying, you do realize that you're getting close to, you know, and that can affect your year end. You can't necessarily do that with elementary ones, but, so the conversations are happening, and it doesn't seem sometimes that the weight of the cost of lost education is part of their scheme, you know, when they're not attending, so. If 10 is, do you think that's too many?
Seems like a lot, but
Because 10 is, if 10 is where you become truant,
is it too late?
then you're already in a different, but truant puts you in a different category. That's a different,
It's a different mechanism that then kicks off when you become truant. Right? We reach out to the parent or the guardian, a meeting gets established, we try to put it, especially K-5, K-8, try to put those interventions in place, try to find out if there's any boundaries or hindrances to that student attending school. And then ultimately, it can go to other levels, like educational neglect, and, you know, ultimately DHS referral, district attorney referral. It can go that far.
In my letter I send out at 7 or 10 days, depending what grade level they're in, they have 3 additional unexcused absences, then it's a required team meeting, and then 2 additional after that, and then it's a required DHS call. Because I don't want parents to think like, well, maybe he'll call on this date, like it's very definitive, we followed this procedure.
and when you make those calls, the parent knows that this is where we are.
Yep.
And this is where it can go.
And it's followed up in the
Okay.
letter, and it says
Yeah.
it right in the letter. Yep.
I don't know, I don't disagree with Ken, but it just seems like a lot.
Can I propose a alternative wording?
Or a different wording, sure.
Yep. Can it be a student identified chronically absent at the end of each quarter? And the student identified as chronically absent at the end of each quarter will be placed
Because
on the
that
list.
goes by a percentage
Yep.
rather than like a number of days. So it would grow by the number of days over the course of the year.
Second week, how are you gonna track that?
Would that be harder to track as opposed to,
Power School flags students that are considered chronically absent for us, so when I log in, I can see X number of students that have missed this person.
but as far as me as a parent knowing what the policy is, I'm looking at 3 days or 10 days or whatever. So that makes it clear to me that at 3 days, whatever the day is, not percentages and whatever, it's more streamlined, that there's specific, if you reach. So I think that I think the number of days is easier to follow for parents, and for students to be able to do that.
All you're saying is 10 would require a doctor's
Yeah,
note, right?
that's
Oh,
all.
okay,
Okay.
yeah, that's,
It's just an allowance for a building
and
principal.
it aligns with everything else
Right.
back here.
It's just
Okay.
easy to say, hey, you hit 10, we'd like to see a doctor's note.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah, that's fine.
And it's the standard, right? It's the bare minimum.
All right.
Okay. So I will word that accordingly. It's gonna read something like, let's see, 10 total absences. Yeah, okay, so it would say something like medical documentation is required for 3 or more consecutive days, or 10 total absences for illness.
Okay.
And again, it's very specific to the illness piece of that number 1.
All right,
Yeah.
so I'm with you there because you're still saying 3, but,
Yeah.
yep, the
Or,
documentation.
And so I think procedurally, outside of policy, this would be a good thing for the 3 principals to talk about the very specific
Yep.
procedures that we're using so that we're consistent across the
Yeah,
buildings.
and there will be slight differences
Yep.
based upon
The age of the student.
right, the truancy laws, because they are a little different depending on the age. And you get both, Zach, you get to be in the middle.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
If a high school student is at a doctor's appointment and comes in just late, is the parents know, and you don't have to answer this, is the parents know enough? Because they always require me to get something from the doctor.
And they typically do request an appointment card or something from the
I
doctor.
just want to make sure they're consistent.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard expectation. Yeah. Okay, that was all I had for attendance, JD.
Perfect.
All right, moving on to, what do I have next on the agenda?
Fun.
Funding. Okay, combined funds. You have policy IGDG.
Oh,
And
this
we
is
would,
an oldie.
this is an oldie, yeah, 73. And so we now have a new main school management sample policy. DFF is the code. Revenues collected from gate receipts from athletic competitions. So, so revenues collected from gate receipts from athletic competitions. Currently, those already come to the general fund. You saw that as a revenue from the last, you probably were here for the finance committee or missed that part of the finance committee. Well, but we do collect the gate receipts and put those to the general fund. However, admission into entertainment events, profit from schools, stores, clubs, and class dues, student activity funds are deposited and accounted into student activity funds maintained at each school. So, I know in my experience, every class at the high school level has a variety of activities that it fundraises for, including concession stands, and that goes to the junior class, or that goes to the sophomore class, or to the, Zach, you guys, 8th grade class is doing some, I don't know how much is tied to volunteerism versus the activity fund there, but.
I've got nothing.
It's comparatively, I was a high school principal before the middle school, and high school deals with 90+% of your student activity accounts. Middle school probably accounts for like 9% of the rest, and then 1% or so at the elementary. So this is very much just focused on the high school. There's some stuff like we do, our student council who does a dance, and then the dance funds go to pay for the 8th graders to go to the Challenger Center. It's pretty basic at the middle school. There's a lot more funds at the high school.
Yeah, a lot more activity funds. And so what we would say is these revenues will be considered school unit funds under the direct control of the superintendent. That should say or designate, because a lot of times that's Jamie who is managing those funds, and she is the one who's developing and implementing procedures relative to these funds with best accounting practices. So we have accounts with some of our local institutions, and there's a way in which we do deposit slips and a way in which they get deposited, counted, and then those receipts sent back to the central office. So that should also include what I'll be adding in there is or designate. And then she apprises me of what's best practice if something changes, and then we pass that on. Typically, you are looking at your school building secretaries who maintain the receipts on those and make those deposits. That's a pretty common practice at all 3 buildings. Procedures for management of student activity funds shall be consistent with sound business and accounting practices, hence the designate. Like I said, Jamie does a very nice job between doing trainings and talking to whether it's Sandra, Patty, Courtney, about how we're going to deposit those funds and how we're going to submit those receipts to, to the central office. Student activity funds are to be used only for student activities. So outside of the athletic competitions, they are used for student activities. that augment school units programs, and Zach's got some great ones going on. Again, when I was in a high school advisor, you know, we paid for prom. You know, that was a, you know, great activity, and that's, as you guys know, especially at the high school level,
And an
very.
expensive.
What's that?
And an expensive.
It was a very, we catered it, which was, yeah, we raised a lot of money, it was awesome. They do help augment some of the program, and specifically, like, I don't necessarily like the term school units programs, because that makes it sound like academic programming, but whatever, it's just one word, but it really is a lot of the fun stuff that these groups go and do, they raise money for it, right? And I think it's a good thing, right? Funds raised by approved student clubs or organizations or from classes shall be expended to the benefit of that specific club, right? So that, again, it's very common, or organization or class, because you do have French clubs versus junior class versus key club, right? You've got all those different clubs and organization and classes that are all doing a variety of fundraising. All expenditures from student activity funds must be approved in advance by the building principal. That's not language that I have any concerns with. I think that's an appropriate place for that approval to live. That does not need to come up to me for approval. I think it makes sense to live in that venue. The senior class, now this is interesting. This is the last paragraph. The senior class may decide how to disperse funds remaining in its class account after graduation. It is not uncommon for a senior class to walk out at graduation time and have leftover money. They try to spend it, sometimes they just don't spend it all for whatever reason. Such disbursements may include gifts to the school, to scholarship fund, or used for an activity approved in advance by the principal. I don't really know where, if I had Brian here, I would ask him, it's really too late. You know, once you kind of get to senior year, all the activities in the end is planned out, and you've got $1,000 left over. There's really no activity that the seniors are going to do. You know, like at that point, it's too late to plan, but I'm sure there maybe been an exception to that. All of the class's outstanding obligations must be paid before the class may expend its remaining funds. Unexpended funds remaining 1 year after the class has graduated, and any interest earned on those funds will be transferred to. We would like, I've met with Jamie on this, we'd like to see it go to a scholarship fund. We don't need that to go to the general fund. Just feel like it's
Money earned by students.
It's money earned.
Back to
It should go back to a student and set up a scholarship fund for those students. So that's what I have circled in my notes. I think it doesn't need to go to the general fund. I would like to strike that, and I'd like to make that a scholarship fund from which any graduating student is eligible to benefit. Now remember, that would be the next graduating class, is right, it's gotta go that year. So you don't have to worry about any student recouping money from the class that they helped raise money, right? It's gonna be the next class. And obviously the scholarship fund would establish criteria for that.
Do you need to specify in there that it goes to the next graduating, a scholarship for the next graduating class? Do you need to clarify that?
I don't have to, because it says unexpended funds remaining 1 year after the class.
1 year, okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
So that gives us that gap in time for when.
in that time frame. Okay.
Having dealt with high school student activities funds, this is key language, because we had $45,000 sitting in my student activity account that couldn't be expended because there was no policy that this really existed. So this is key policy to have, that language.
Yep. So what we would be looking to do with this policy is we would be striking receipts from athletic competitions. Sorry, we'd be striking athletic competitions because those do come to the general fund. And then we would be saying the rest of all of that, right? That's how this money is going to be expended. It's going to be put in for the students, for the clubs, for the classes, for the organizations. It can be spent at the approval of the building principal, and ultimately, a year later, if a senior class, a year after it's walked, has money left over, there will be a scholarship fund set up from which another student can benefit.
Why did you strike athletic competitions?
Revenues collected from gate, admissions to school, entertainment, profits, those those go into the general fund, not the activity accounts at those schools. So the athletic competitions would come, that would continue to come in as revenue.
I mean, obviously, the cross-references are there just for, it's a sample policy, those
Yeah.
are gonna be crossed
So
off.
we don't have those, that's correct.
And what about boosters? Where does that get filtered through? That would be my only question. And then my
Do
only.
we have like boosters raising money or
Yeah, like,
donating money?
yeah, boosters, the boosters down here, you know, say at football games, that collects the snack shack, all that money, where's that all get filtered through? I just wanna make, I don't think it gets filtered through the school for the,
So I would assume that they're like the PAC, the Parent Advisory Council at the middle school. So they are a completely separate agency that withholds those funds. And then it's a donation essentially to the school whenever it's expended. So.
I think they're a 503C.
Yeah,
they are.
they're,
Can we just make sure, because I think that they do their own thing, and I just wanna make sure that that's excluded from here. And then the only other thing that I wanna make sure of is, I don't know if this is true or not, I've heard of, say, basketball, raising, a group of parents raising money separately. It sounds like that cannot be done, and coaches have gotta make sure that any fundraising is filtered through the school.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
And
fundraising.
so that just
fundraising,
needs
yeah.
to really be communicated by Rick,
Yeah.
procedurally.
is it possible to put language in here where it explicitly says that the PTO and PAC are not subject to this policy? Because I could see where it could become confusing years from now, where someone is saying it's subjective, but they're not subjective. Is it possible to put explicit language that at the Durham Schools PTO, the Hermon Middle School's PAC, and the high school booster clubs are not affiliated to this policy?
Yeah, I mean, so the last line, student activity funds, they're part of the audit, right? They're part of the district's fund. The boosters is not, right? They're not part of our audit. So I don't know if we have to explicitly state that they're not subject to this. I can reach out to main school management to see if they have a recommendation or alternative language for boosters, a parent council.
I mean, from a procedural standpoint, everything comes through us that they do.
Middle school, does not.
Okay.
Okay. So I can look into some, language, or I can reach out to main school management to see if there's any language regarding, again, boosters and such as, or parent council.
At my school, I mean, everything gets, I go to all of the meetings and they ask for my approval first before like pursuing anything, so that, I don't know if it's procedural.
Yeah, because a lot, right, the boosters groups, they help the schools, they fundraise, right?
Right.
They're gonna do a craft fair again at the elementary school, right? They're gonna help do fun stuff, but that's not on our
Right.
books,
Yep.
right? And so I think that's,
But would it, looking to see if there's language that's available would
right,
kind of preclude anybody asking that question. The answer would already be there,
right.
you know, even just, it would be there to clarify it, so it wouldn't be a question. The answer would already be either yes, it does, or, you know, yes, it is, or no, it isn't part of it, so.
No more
Just some-
ambiguity.
Exactly,
Yeah.
just some clarifying.
Mrs. Early, may I ask a question? Are you ready to answer me?
What is your question?
I was just looking to see if we have a scholarship policy, so that could be outlined, and I can't seem to find one, but it doesn't even skim me, so I just wanted to, before we reference that and put money in a scholarship, that terminology should be also make sure that we have that base covered. Or should we?
I just talked to Kate Bartley, she's runs in the snack shack. So currently, all their funds run through the school. All the snack shack funds run through the school. Now, she said that they're creating a 501(c), and eventually they'll get pulled over, but currently, all the snack shack funds run through. Just looking.
If those are running through the school, then we need tighter control over that money that the boosters do.
And so we just have to, again, make sure that that language is in there for the boosters organization that's operating.
I would encourage for that, I would encourage that we push them to be the 503C that they've been trying to do, so that they can, I I don't think that should be filtered through the school, unless there's tight control.
So I'll look into that and then add that language in as they recommend. Last one is GBEBA, dressing and grooming.
1975, bell bottom.
Yeah, you've got very short, all school personnel, shall maintain a neat, well-groomed presentation consistent with the standards expected for his or her individual assignment. I don't think it could be more vague than that. I think that's as about as well written as you could write something. So you have some recommended sample language. I didn't have sample policy, but I talked with Ms. Bates at the, I talked with Ms. Bates at Main School Management, and she kind of helped me walk through some language here. Actually, she pretty much, so you have Hermon School District employees should be readily distinguishable. I really like how that's phrased, readily distinguishable from district students. The dress and grooming of district employees shall be clean, neat, and in a manner appropriate for their assignment. In addition, employees should regard role modeling of appropriate dress and grooming standards as part of their professional responsibility. District employees are expected at minimum to abide by the dress and grooming standards specified for our students in policy JKAA, student dress, or in the student code of conduct or student handbook. That we have dress and code of conduct. We've got that everywhere. Under Maine law, there should be no discrimination against school employees whose grooming includes hair texture, afro hairstyles, or protective hairstyles, including braids, twists, and locks. I think, I personally really appreciate, I like the, in addition, employees should regard role modeling of appropriate dress and grooming standards. I mean, we talk about preparing students, right? It's in our mission statement, and there's an expectation when you go to an interview, when you have a job, whatever that might be. And I like the fact that we are stressing that to our teachers, that we, not only are we going to teach them, but we are going to show them what it looks like to be professional. Unfortunately, I personally would like to see it be even more specific regarding the types of clothes that one should wear. People always ask me, what's the expectation? It's hard to not be like, you wear a shirt and tie. That's not how it is, but.
That happened back in 1975.
Right, yeah.
That was the way it was.
Yeah, yeah. My wife hates it that I wear a vest. She's like, you should wear a vest. It's cold.
I think being more explicit would certainly, when we do dress down days, like jeans days, and I don't know, I think it's kind of tricky when it's really ambiguous of what the expectation is, so.
What I like about it is that ultimately, if I'm walking down the hall as a building principal, a superintendent, whatever it might be, and I see a teacher who's not participating in one of the dress down days, which we pay money to do, and it goes to a cause, then I can say to them, look, I can't even distinguish you from a student. You are not stressing right what we aspire to teach our students, which is responsible, productive citizens who are going to go out in the work environment. And I can hold that person accountable to that. I think at least it gives us some ground to stand on as far as our expectations of us. But this was about as detailed as Maine School Management would issue of sample policy. So just for consideration, we've got this is our last, I think, 75 policy. So figured we might as well at least amend it, redact it, or
Yeah,
change it.
I mean, I would like to keep it at this. I know there was a suggestion that school committee should be added to it, but I gotta say, we're not added to all the other policies throughout. So I would prefer to keep the school committee separate from that.
There are separate policies for school committee members.
Yes, no, but
I
This
would
is for
prefer that
students
it
and
just stay for
employees.
the employees.
I'm looking at employees right here, yep, absolutely, Hermon School District employees, yep. Any feedback overall in regards to anything you don't like or anything you'd like to see added?
think it's hard, because as soon as you put specifics to it, it's gonna become contentious.
So does this cover enough? I mean, if it was more specific, I can see, well, I'm not there, but I'm close to it, but I'm not there, you know, people looking at it that way, but,
I can see both sides. I think it would become contentious. I think it's also, so subjective that, my definition of clean meat in a manner appropriate for the assignment may be different than Mr. Grant's. And so like, that's where some of that is going to be, that's where it can be difficult to address employees. Unless they're really egregious, you know. Mrs. Eau Claire's coming in with her belly shirt on, I mean,
I am a little
that's
concerned
clear, but.
about the second paragraph, because in the previous policy, there did not mention anything of the student dress code. And if we're saying that the minimum should be the student dress code, then I could foresee some staff members, maybe not the current ones, because I think we have amazing staff members that wouldn't necessarily push the boundaries, but I could see that they're saying, but if it's minimum for that, if they can wear jeans, then I can wear jeans. Like, I could see someone pushing that.
But the first paragraph says distinguishable from students, so that would be my thought on that, but I understand what you're saying.
I don't know, sometimes it's
Do we
hard for
care
me to
about
be
jeans?
distinguishable from Mr. Venziano's kids. You saw the pictures?
They are dapper dressers.
Yes, they are very good dressers.
Gosh, every time that goes off, I feel like someone's killing a cat or something. It's, I don't know, it's tricky, and it gets into,
Are you having issues with gender dress?
Very minimal.
But there's always, every year there are dress code issues that have to be addressed.
I mean, my issues come more around hygiene, to be honest. The ones that have been brought to me, which I've had to address rather than
Awkward.
necessarily address. And they are very awkward
Yeah.
conversations. Like, these are some of the most awkward conversations you can have as an administrator.
and mine are a little bit different, it's not hygiene. My staff are often on the floor with children. And that's part of their job. And so jeans are more comfortable to be on, so my staff would really like to be able to wear jeans.
But I think-
Certainly would be on, they're on the floor with students, but
Melissa, I think that in a manner appropriate to their assignment,
Yep.
in the first paragraph also allows that flexibility. I don't expect the PE teacher to be wearing, loafers and a shirt and tie, or an educational technician that's always down, escorting, moving, working with, high-end student.
And then I think where we'll get into a tangle around that is, well, Melissa's teachers get to wear jeans. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think, you know where I'm going with this.
I hate jeans, just so you know.
see, I don't think jeans
No.
jeans belong
No, they don't.
in a school atmosphere. On a dress-down day,
Yeah, it's different.
when you're participating, because that sets you in a separate, you're fundraising, you're in jeans and you're fundraising. I think, years ago, people dressed to go to work. And it's gotten a lot more casual. Comfort is more of a consideration than, but I think that, people wore pants, dress pants to wear jeans to work in a school every day, I think, is, not necessarily where I would be comfortable, but.
So I would say, and I would say this on February 12th too, this is your policy, specifically, this is very much a school committee. They're all your policies, but specifically, how do you want your teachers to look? Right, because ultimately that's.
Yeah, I'll follow through.
Right.
Whatever you decide, you make my job easier by having a clear policy.
Yeah.
And then I'll do whatever the policy says.
I know what I would do if I was running my own school district. I would have very high expectations for how people should look in a classroom. But, that being said, I also understand that there are extenuating circumstances in how you work with those students.
Those staff getting thrown up on and peed on. Yeah.
I think that this does a nice job at striking between an assignment and also a minimum. And I think if we can use assignment as our flexibility, and we have a minimum where I then have to be able to distinguish it from the student, that gives me, the administrator in the building, on the boots on the ground leeway to deal with anything that's not in between those two things.
I will also say it's a conversation every summer between Melissa, I, and Brian about what we're gonna do for jeans for that year in regards to what we would allow. And I think we're all on pretty much the same page now.
I think so.
But that is definitely a conversation, and a clear policy may take that conversation away, and I wouldn't complain
I
about
would
that.
not.
So what are we wanting? Jeans are allowed only on dress down days? Is it something as simple as that?
Honestly, I don't care, as long as someone tells me what to do.
So what?
I'll put it in place. I will tell you, my staff are passionate about wearing jeans. This is like the hill to die on for them. I don't understand it as a high school teacher, like, I never wore jeans to work. I don't know. It's not important to me, but I will tell you that it is very important to my staff, that they are able to wear them. Right now, we do it on Fridays, and we have a charity that we're raising money for, so that seems to kind of suffice. If I sense that morale is really bad, I sometimes throw in, hey, how about tomorrow we wear jeans, it's Thursday, let's all wear our hot gear and jeans, and boy, that makes me really happy, so sometimes I use it as an occasional morale boost. Sorry, but I do. It's free.
We have to address the jeans issue somehow. So whether it's, they're only allowed on dress down, however the wording would be. But we have to address it, it sounds like.
I don't have any issue if we were to amend this to add in something to the effect that it is the district's expectation that jeans are worn only on approved building, whatever you guys call it.
Days approved by building
Days
administrator.
approved by no building administrator.
There you go.
I can add that in on, that would be the second paragraph, the next sentence, we would add that in. Can I tell you a funny story? This is on camera, so. When I was 20.
Oh,
when I
there
was
it is,
20
okay.
yeah. When I was 23, was teaching here, I always say that because I don't want Brian to find out. So I was 23 years old, my first year teaching, it was June, so I made it through my whole year. And it was finals, and that was at a time when finals were, like, you gave a final, if you didn't have kids, we had some flexibility here at the high school.
Good old days.
Good old days, right? When you're like, oh man, I only had to give one final today. It was like college finals. So I came to school in shorts.
No.
I had no finals to give that day. And
Wow. He
one of,
crucified you, didn't he?
nope, one of the teachers saw me coming in,
He saved you.
and I had no final that morning. I had a final in the afternoon, and it was Mr. Boucher. God rest his soul. And he came up to me, he said, Brian is going to kill you. Go home and put some pants on. So I'll cover your final if you need to. And I said, no, I don't have one this morning. So I ran home and put on dress pants. Yep.
Good grief. And here you are.
Would have been an issue if the policy was in place.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, are we done?
Young and dumb. That is it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next meeting is February 27th, I believe.
We'll see how fast February goes.
Yeah.
This one went so fast,
Okay,
so fast.
I was my